What happens when royal privilege collides with live television? In just 12 seconds, one sharp comment would turn a friendly late-night chat into one of the most shocking meltdowns ever caught on camera. Last night, under the glittering lights of the Graham Norton show, viewers witnessed an on-air confrontation that no one saw coming. A moment that transformed Prince Harry from charming guest to perceived prima donna, leaving Britain's most beloved host with no choice but to push back. The evening began like any other Friday taping. Graham Norton, the unflappable ringmaster of celebrity wit, was ready for another easy night of laughter. The lineup was perfect. A Hollywood actress promoting her latest film, a comedian fresh off a sold-out tour, and Prince Harry, there to discuss his new charitable foundation. The audience buzzed with anticipation. Lights on. Cameras rolling. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Graham Norton Show. Graham beamed, radiating his trademark warmth. The studio applauded. The red sofa gleamed, and everything seemed blissfully ordinary. Until it wasn't. When Prince Harry stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted in cheers. He looked confident, polished, every inch the modern royal. Graham greeted him with his signature charm. "Your Royal Highness, wonderful to have you here tonight," he said, extending his hand. But the handshake was brief, almost cold. "Just Harry is fine," came the reply. His tone carried an edge sharp enough to make Graham's smile flicker. "Of course, Harry it is." Graham recovered smoothly, gesturing toward the sofa. "Please, make yourself comfortable." The actress and comedian shifted slightly to make room, but Harry paused, frowning at the seating. "Actually, I was told I'd have the end seat," he said flatly, loud enough for the microphones to catch. The studio air changed. Graham, still the consummate professional, offered a genial laugh. "Oh, not a problem at all. Sarah, would you mind sliding down just a touch?" Actress Sarah Matthews smiled politely and moved. "Of course, no problem." But Harry wasn't done. As he sat, he glanced up at the lights with visible irritation. "This lighting's quite harsh, isn't it? I specifically requested softer lighting in my contract rider." A ripple of unease swept through the audience. Whispered confusion. Raised eyebrows. Graham tried to smooth it over with a quip. "Well, harsh lighting is the curse of television, I'm afraid. Makes us all look like we need a good holiday." He chuckled. No laugh from Harry. Only a faint sigh as he shifted again, muttering, "I suppose that's fine for most people. But given my position, I expected a bit more consideration." The tension was palpable. The other guests exchanged uncertain glances. Graham, trying to steady the moment, smiled again. "Well, your position on the sofa looks comfortable enough to me." Harry's eyes flashed. "That's not what I meant, and I think you know that perfectly well." The studio fell silent. Graham Norton, a man known for coaxing laughter out of the stiffest celebrities, now found himself face to face with icy defiance. Still, he soldiered on. "Right then, shall we talk about your new foundation? I understand it's focused on supporting military veterans. Wonderful work." For a brief moment, the storm seemed to ease. Harry straightened up. "Yes, it's something close to my heart. Having served myself, I understand the challenges veterans face when transitioning back to civilian life." Graham nodded, encouraging. "Admirable work. Can you tell us about some of the specific programs?" Harry cut him off. "Actually, before we continue, could someone deal with that audience member who keeps coughing? It's quite distracting." A stunned beat. Graham blinked. "I'm sorry. Which audience member?" "The woman in the third row," Harry said sharply. "She's been coughing since I sat down. It's very difficult to concentrate." The camera panned discreetly toward the audience. A middle-aged woman sat mortified, covering her mouth. She'd coughed, twice, maybe 3 times. Nothing more. Graham's face finally showed the first crack in his composure. The charm, the poise, the ease. all strained against the growing tension that was about to boil over. "I'm terribly sorry," Graham said, keeping his tone even. "But I think that's just normal audience behavior. Perhaps we could continue with the interview." Harry's reply came cold and clipped. "Normal for your usual guests, perhaps. But I'd have expected a bit more control over the environment for someone in my position." The other guests were now openly staring. Sarah Matthews looked stunned, eyebrows raised. Comedian James Walsh shook his head almost imperceptibly, as if to say, "Is this really happening?" Graham drew a quiet breath. Years of live television told him to keep his footing, to try one last time to save the show from total derailment. "Harry," he said gently, "I think perhaps we should focus on the wonderful work your foundation is doing. Our viewers would love to hear how they can get involved." But Harry wasn't interested in rescue. "Speaking of the audience," he interrupted, "I noticed when I came out that the applause seemed rather lackluster. Was the audience properly briefed on the significance of tonight's appearance?" A ripple of disbelief passed through the studio. This was the moment the facade began to crack. Not just Harry's composure, but Graham's. The host's trademark smile tightened at the edges, his tone now carrying a faint, unmistakable edge. "The audience was briefed exactly as they always are," he said evenly. "And I thought their welcome was quite lovely, actually." "Well, I suppose you'd think that," Harry said, leaning back with casual disdain. "But compared to American television, where they understand protocol, the difference is quite stark." The silence that followed was heavy enough to hear the hum of the studio lights. Sarah and James looked ready to disappear into the sofa cushions. Even the camera operators had stopped moving, their lenses fixed on what was fast becoming a career-defining implosion. Graham Norton had interviewed everyone, from unhinged pop stars to drunken Oscar winners, but never, in over 2 decades behind that desk, had he encountered this unfiltered entitlement delivered with the icy confidence of a man convinced he was above reproach. "I see," Graham said finally, his voice quiet but stripped of all warmth. "And how exactly should we have prepared differently for your appearance tonight?" That question would become the spark that ignited the explosion. Harry leaned back with a smirk that sent a chill through the studio. "Well, Graham, perhaps your production team should have researched proper royal protocol before booking someone of my caliber. This isn't some local morning show." The words hit like a slap. Even through the cameras, viewers would later swear they saw Graham's expression change. A flicker of disbelief, then something else. Resolve. "Someone of your caliber," Graham repeated slowly, deliberately. "Harry, you're a guest on this show. Just like everyone else who sits on this sofa. Just like everyone else." Harry's voice rose, indignant. "I think you're forgetting who you're speaking to. I'm not some reality star desperate for publicity," Sarah Matthews audibly gasped. James Walsh stared at the floor, his jaw tight. The audience held its breath, the atmosphere electric. That rare, awful silence before everything breaks. Graham's smile vanished entirely. "No," he said, his voice low but cutting. "You're not a reality star. You're someone who should understand basic courtesy and respect for other people." Harry shot to his feet, towering over the seated host. "Courtesy? You want to lecture me about courtesy? Your staff treated me like any ordinary guest the moment I arrived. No proper greeting, no acknowledgement of protocol, no recognition of my status." The camera operators hesitated, unsure whether to follow him or cut to commercial. This wasn't television anymore. It was theater, raw and unscripted. Graham remained seated, though his eyes locked on Harry's with a steadiness that quieted even the whispering crew. "Your status," he said calmly, "doesn't give you the right to be rude. Not to my staff, not to my guests, and not to my audience." Harry's voice cracked with fury. "Rude? I've been nothing but clear about my expectations. If that threatens your little television ego, perhaps you should reconsider who you book on your show. And that was it, the breaking point. Graham stood up slowly, the studio lights catching the flush rising in his face. When he spoke, his voice was calm but cold enough to silence the entire room. "My television ego," he said evenly. "Harry, I've been doing this job for over 20 years. I've interviewed royalty, presidents, and some of the biggest stars in the world. And not once, not ever, has anyone spoken to me, my guests, or my audience, with such breathtaking arrogance." Harry took a step closer, his voice rising now, trembling with fury. "Arrogance? How dare you accuse me of arrogance? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for this country? What my family has given?" Graham's Irish lilt sharpened as he shot back, his patience finally gone. "I know exactly what your family has given," he said, his voice ringing through the studio. "And right now, you're disrespecting every bit of that legacy with your behavior tonight." The studio was electric with tension. The audience leaned forward in their seats, wide-eyed and frozen, unable to believe what they were witnessing. This wasn't just an awkward interview anymore. It was a full-blown confrontation between one of Britain's most beloved hosts and a member of the royal family. "You have no right to speak about my family's legacy," Harry snarled, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. "You're nothing but a talk show host who makes jokes for a living." Graham's eyes flashed, not with fear, but with something sharper. "You're right," he said coolly. "I am a talk show host, and this is my show, which means I decide who sits on that sofa and who doesn't." Harry's expression darkened. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening anyone," Graham replied, his voice steady now, the calm before the storm. "I'm telling you that your behavior tonight has been completely unacceptable, and I won't tolerate it for another second." Harry let out a short, humorless laugh. "You won't tolerate it? Who do you think you are? I'm the host of this show," Graham said firmly. "And you're no longer welcome on it." The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah Matthews covered her mouth in shock. James Walsh sat frozen, eyes wide. The audience didn't dare move. The air seemed to hold its breath. Harry stared at Graham, disbelief written across his face. "Excuse me?" "You heard me perfectly well," Graham said, his tone now carrying the weight and authority that had made him one of the most respected figures on television. "Your behavior tonight has been insulting to my other guests, dismissive of my audience, and disrespectful to my staff. I'm asking you to leave." Harry blinked, stunned. "You're asking me to leave? Do you understand what you're doing right now?" "I understand exactly what I'm doing," Graham replied without hesitation. "I'm protecting the integrity of this show and the respect owed to everyone in this studio." Harry's gaze darted around the room, to the cameras, to the audience, to the faces of his fellow guests. No one came to his defense. The crew avoided his eyes, pretending to busy themselves with equipment. Sarah and James sat still, their silence an unspoken verdict. "This is outrageous," Harry said, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. "You cannot treat me this way. Do you have any idea what this will mean for your career?" Graham's answer came calm and devastating. "My career will be just fine, thank you. I built it on treating people with respect and expecting the same in return, something you might consider learning." Harry jabbed a finger toward him. "You'll regret this, Graham. You have no idea what you've just done." "What I've done," Graham replied evenly, "is exactly what any decent host would do when faced with a guest who believes their title gives them the right to treat others badly." The confrontation had reached its peak. Harry stood there, chest heaving, face flushed with rage. But there was something else in his eyes now. The dawning realization that he had lost, completely, Graham Norton, meanwhile stood tall and calm, surrounded by quiet solidarity. The crew, the guests, even the audience, all behind him. "Security," Graham said clearly, his voice carrying across the hushed studio. "Could you please escort our guest from the building?" 2 security guards appeared almost instantly, as if they had been waiting for the cue. They approached with measured professionalism. "Polite but firm, sir," one said to Harry. "If you could please come with us." Harry looked from the guards to Graham, to the faces staring back at him from the audience. For a long, charged moment, he seemed ready to argue. But then, realizing the futility, he straightened his jacket with a jerky, angry motion. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Yes, it is," Graham replied softly. "And it should never have started in the first place." The guards guided Harry toward the exit. The audience remained utterly silent. The man who had walked in radiating royal confidence now left in humiliation, escorted out like any other disruptive guest. The studio doors closed behind him with a soft click that sounded, somehow, like thunder. Graham stood alone in the center of the set, his chest rising and falling, his face pale but resolute. He had just done something unprecedented in television history. He had thrown a member of the royal family off his show, and he had done it with dignity. "Well," Graham said finally, his voice shaky but regaining its familiar warmth. "That was certainly unexpected." For a beat, silence. And then the studio erupted. The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause, the longest of the night. Sarah Matthews and James Walsh joined in, both visibly relieved and impressed by the composure their host had shown. Graham Norton had stood his ground, against privilege, against arrogance, against entitlement, and done it with quiet authority. In that moment, he reminded everyone watching why he remained one of television's most respected hosts. The man who built his career on kindness had just proven something deeper. That sometimes true kindness means refusing to enable cruelty, no matter who it comes from.